Picture this. A fisherman casting his nets off the Mexican coast makes a discovery that will send shockwaves through Hollywood. The body floating in those shallow waters belonged to someone millions knew and loved, Carol Wayne, the bubbly, vivacious star of The Tonight Show. But what the police found when they investigated her death was far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. With her distinctive high voice, captivating figure, and impeccable comedic timing, Carol Wayne had carved out her own special place in television history as Johnny Carson's unforgettable matinee girl. Night after night, she brought joy and laughter to countless viewers. But behind that infectious smile lay secrets darker than anyone suspected, secrets that would ultimately lead to her mysterious and tragic end. Carol's journey began in the heart of America, born in Chicago in 1942. At just 15 years old, barely out of childhood herself, she was already performing alongside her sister in a grueling 42-city tour with the Ice Capades. But this early taste of stardom came with a devastating price. The sisters had to abandon their education, dropping out of high school to chase their dreams on ice. Then, in one fateful moment, everything changed. Carol was gliding through her routine when disaster struck. She tripped and fell with such force that it left a 5-inch scar running down her knee. That single accident didn't just end her skating career, it shattered the only life she'd ever known. Here was a young woman who had sacrificed her childhood, her education, her chance at normalcy, all for a dream that vanished in an instant. But Carol was nothing if not resilient. Faced with the wreckage of her skating ambitions, she and her sister Nina made a bold decision that would raise eyebrows back home. They became showgirls at the glamorous Tropicana in Las Vegas. The barely there costumes and sultry performances were a far cry from the wholesome world of ice skating. When Carol's mother saw their scandalous outfits, she couldn't help but quip, "Could you ask them for a couple more feathers?" It was during one of those trips from Vegas to Los Angeles that fate intervened again. At a party, a mysterious stranger approached Carol with words that would change her life. "We're looking for a girl just like you." The next morning's screen test would launch her into the world that would both make her famous and ultimately destroy her. Carol had her own cheeky theory about her success in Hollywood. With a knowing laugh and a glance at her famous figure, she would joke, "And I've gotten all my parts ever since then." Love seemed to find Carol as easily as cameras did. While working in Vegas, she met Loretta Larry Sarah and fell head over heels. Their May 1965 wedding should have been the beginning of a beautiful love story. Instead, it became a masterclass in heartbreak. The couple divorced just 1 month after their second anniversary. Carol's response? A joke that masked deeper pain. "Skating taught me to be limber, but that marriage really taught me how to be flexible." But 1967, the year of her divorce, also brought Carol her greatest professional triumph. Johnny Carson and his team offered her something that would define her career, a recurring role on The Tonight Show as the innocent, double entendre spouting matinee girl in Art Fern's tea time sketches. Over 100 appearances on The Tonight Show made Carol a household name, but it also sparked scandalous rumors. The chemistry between her and Carson was undeniable, electric, impossible to ignore. When pressed about their relationship, Carol's response was tantalizingly honest: "He loves me. I love him. It's an understanding, a given. He still sees me every day in his dreams." The timing, she claimed, was always wrong. They were never single at the same time. Enter Barry Feinstein, the rock and roll photographer who moved in Hollywood's coolest circles, counting Bob Dylan and Steve McQueen among his close friends. There was just one problem. He was still married to Mary Travers of the folk group Peter, Paul and Mary. But not for long. Carol and Barry made it official in 1969, and a year later, she gave birth to her only child, a son named Alex. 5 years, that's all the marriage lasted. By 1974, Carol was single again, this time juggling motherhood with her career. But Carol never stayed single long. Just a year later, she married television producer Burt Sugarman, who cast her in his shows and seemed to offer the stability she craved. Then came the blow that would begin Carol's slow descent into tragedy. In the early 80s, Johnny Carson, unhappy with The Tonight Show's direction, threatened to walk away. NBC panicked and convinced him to stay, but at a cost. The show was cut from an hour and a half to just 1 hour. The Matinee Girl sketches? Gone. Just like that, Carol's most reliable source of income and fame vanished. Making matters worse, her marriage to Sugarman ended in divorce right around the same time. For the first time in years, Carol Wayne had no steady work lined up. The roles that had once come easily now dried up almost completely. Desperation led her to make a controversial decision in 1984. She posed for Playboy, shedding her wholesome image in a desperate bid to revive her career. But there was something darker happening behind the scenes. Carol's teenage son Alex had introduced her to a new vice, clove cigarettes. She embraced the habit with frightening intensity, smoking so much that the distinctive scent got her kicked out of Hollywood restaurants. Worse still, she began experimenting with more dangerous substances. The same year as her Playboy shoot, Carol filed for bankruptcy. The court documents revealed a heartbreaking truth: she declared zero income. A woman who had once been a television star was now completely broke, unable to land any new roles. There was one glimmer of hope. Carol's performance in the dramatic film Heartbreakers earned critical acclaim. Roger Ebert himself singled out her work, saying, "Her performance is so good, so heartbreaking, if you will, that it pulls the whole movie together." It could have been the beginning of a serious acting career. Instead, it would be her final film. In January 1985, Carol made what would prove to be a fateful decision. She traveled to the Los Hadas resort in Manzanillo, Mexico, reportedly to overcome her substance abuse problems. She wasn't alone. Accompanying her was Edward Durston, a car salesman and Hollywood fixture whose presence would soon become central to the mystery surrounding her death. If Carol had truly gone to Mexico to get clean, the evidence suggests she failed. Hotel employees reported that she and Durston spent their time drinking, dancing, and partying. But the fun was about to take a sinister turn. On January 10th, everything went wrong. Carol and Durston were supposed to fly back to Los Angeles, but somehow, they missed their flight. With no money to stay at the expensive Los Hadas resort, the staff tried to help by securing them a room at the more affordable Playa de Santiago hotel nearby. Carol's reaction was explosive. According to eyewitnesses, she was furious about the downgrade, considering the new hotel a dump. When they arrived at 8:30 that evening, she refused to even get out of the taxi. As Durston and the bellboy brought their luggage upstairs, Carol stood outside, seething with rage. When Durston returned to the hotel foyer, he made a chilling discovery: Carol had vanished. No one had seen where she went. His response to her disappearance would later raise serious questions about his character and his possible involvement in what happened next. Instead of searching for Carol or alerting authorities, Durston simply went to the hotel bar to wait. When she didn't return, he made an even more shocking decision: he checked into a different hotel, making it impossible for Carol to find him if she tried. The next morning, without having seen Carol for hours, he flew back to Los Angeles. But here's the truly callous part: he took her luggage with him, telling the airline she would pick it up in the morning, even though he had no idea where she was. 3 days later, on January 13th, a local fisherman casting his nets made a horrifying discovery. Carol Wayne's fully clothed body was floating in a shallow bay. The beloved Matinee Girl was gone, and her death would raise more questions than it would ever answer. Mexican police immediately declared Carol's death suspicious. The autopsy revealed she had been dead for 36 to 48 hours when found, meaning whatever happened occurred shortly after her argument with Durston at the hotel. Surprisingly, despite her known substance abuse problems, her blood contained no alcohol or drugs. Whatever demons she'd been fighting, she'd managed to keep them at bay in her final hours. The circumstances baffled investigators. The waters where she was found were gentle and shallow. She had no bruises or cuts suggesting she'd fallen or been injured. Manzanillo District Attorney Jorge Hernandez didn't believe Carol would have simply drowned herself in such calm waters. All eyes turned to Edward Durston, and what investigators discovered about his past sent chills down their spines. This wasn't the first time he'd been connected to a suspicious death. In 1969, aspiring actress Diane Linkletter had called Durston to her house, then apparently jumped from a window to her death. While he was cleared in that case, the similarities were disturbing. Despite the suspicions, despite the questionable timeline, despite his cold abandonment of Carol in Mexico, Edward Durston was never charged with anything. Carol's death was ultimately ruled an accident. Investigators concluded she had slipped and fallen into the water while walking on the beach, upset and distracted after their fight. The irony is almost unbearable. One of the running jokes about Carol on The Tonight Show, referencing her famous figure, was, "With that chest, this lady will never drown." Even more heartbreaking was an exchange she'd had with Johnny Carson, where he told her, "Someday you'll be 47, his age at the time." Carol had replied hopefully, "I hope so." Tragically, she was only 42 when she died. Johnny Carson himself was so devastated by Carol's death that he retired his Art Fern character, the one most closely associated with Carol's Matinee Girl, for nearly an entire year. It was a tribute to a colleague, a friend, and perhaps something more, whose light had been extinguished far too soon. Carol Wayne's story is a cautionary tale about the dark side of fame, the price of childhood stardom, and the mysterious circumstances that can surround even the most beloved figures. Her infectious laughter may have died with her in those shallow Mexican waters, but the questions about what really happened that night continue to haunt us decades later. The truth about Carol Wayne's final moments may never be known, but her legacy, as a performer who brought joy to millions and as a woman who struggled with demons that ultimately consumed her, serves as a reminder that behind every smile, every laugh, every moment of entertainment, lies a human being fighting battles we may never see.